We spend a lot of time learning, understanding ideas, concepts, frameworks. But there's a gap that most people never cross. The gap between understanding something and actually living it. In the language of Torah, that gap is the difference between Binah and Daas. Binah is when something makes sense. Daas is when what you understand and how you actually live are aligned. When what you know becomes the way you experience and respond to reality. This series is about closing that gap, taking ideas that we understand intellectually and turning them into something real, something lived, something that shapes how we see everything that happens in our lives. We'll be working with Torah teachings that approach this with precision and structure, not just what to believe, but how reality actually works and how to operate within it correctly. So this is not a series about inspiration. It's a series about process, a structured path from Binah to Daas. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Shema podcast. I'll share with you, have read that the content of this episode was researched and really outlined months ago. But I wanted to wait till after Shavuos to give it. I thought it'd be more timely, just where it sort of fell in the Jewish year within the Parshios that we are studying now. But I'll tell you that this teaching, as I reviewed my notes this morning, stirred up a lot of emotion inside of me because it's so timely for me personally. Before we begin, I want to dedicate this episode to two amazing people, Yehudit Bat Sarah and Avraham Hillel ben Fegi, who really embody one of the key central messages that we will be discussing today. We're going to be analyzing the framework of the Midbar, the wilderness, where one of the things we discover is that the channels through which blessings arrive are not the source of the blessing itself. And sometimes Hashem sends his kindness through other people. And this week, I was privileged to experience that firsthand. So may Hashem bless both Yehudit Bat Sarah and Avraham Hillel ben Fegi with health, happiness, success, material abundance, spiritual connection, and many years of continued opportunities to help others. One of the foundational ideas of the entire From Binah to Daas series is that Torah is multidimensional. At the most basic level, the written Torah contains both laws and narratives. The mitzvos train us how to respond to reality, while the narrative teaches us how to interpret reality. The stories of the Torah help us recognize what is happening in our lives and, more importantly, Hashem's role within those events. But the Torah operates on even deeper levels. The Torah's narrative provides the historical arc of mankind and the Jewish people. It tells the story of where humanity came from, where it is going, and the role of the Jewish people within that journey. At the same time, the Torah presents reoccurring patterns that repeat throughout history. The stories are not merely records of the past, they are archetypes. They are frameworks that reappear again and again throughout Jewish history. And on an even more personal level, they are the story of our own lives. The same Torah that describes the journey of humanity also describes the journey of the individual soul. As an example, Chazal teach that there are two beings who are described as seeing from one end of the world to the other. Adam, before the sin, and a baby in utero. Adam is expelled from Gan Eden and enters a world of struggle, uncertainty, and labor. A child leaves the protective environment of the womb and enters a world of challenge and growth. These are not merely similar stories. They reflect the same underlying pattern. The expulsion from Gan Eden and the experience of birth both describe leaving a state of completeness and entering a world of development, responsibility, and avoda. Likewise, many of our sages explain that the journey toward Eretz Yisrael reflects the soul's journey towards its ultimate destination. The Torah story is simultaneously the story of a nation, the story of humanity, and the story of every individual life. The fractal nature of Torah is one of its most remarkable features. The same patterns repeat at different scales. What is true of a person is often true of a nation. What is true of a nation is often true of humanity. This is not a new way of reading Torah. Chazal and many of our greatest sages consistently teach that events occurring on one level of reality repeat themselves on other levels of reality. Today, we are going to examine one of those frameworks, the Midbar, which translates as the wilderness. When we think about the Midbar, we usually think about a place. We think about the 40 years the Jewish people spent wandering between Egypt and the land of Israel. The number 40 itself is significant in Torah. Again and again, 40 is associated with transformation and the emergence of a new reality. The flood lasts 40 days as the world is transformed and recreated. Moshe spends 40 days on Har Sinai before bringing down the Torah. A mikvah requires 40 seah of water and symbolizes spiritual renewal. And Chazal teach that it takes 40 days from conception to the formation of a child in the womb. 40 is a Torah's number of transition and transformation. The Jewish people did not spend 40 years in the Midbar by accident. They were undergoing a process of becoming. An entire generation was being transformed from slaves into a nation capable of fulfilling its mission. But the Midbar is not merely a place. Just as Egypt, or Mitzrayim, is more than a geographic location, the Midbar is more than a geographic wilderness. The word Mitzrayim is related to Mitzarim, constraints and limitations. Chazal and many of our sages teach that Egypt represents a state of constriction, a consciousness trapped by limitations, habits, fears, and false assumptions. The Exodus is therefore not only a historical event, it is also a process that repeats itself throughout life whenever a person breaks free from the limitations that have been holding them back. The Midbar functions in a similar way. It is not merely a place, it is a stage of existence, a stage that exists not only in Jewish history, but repeatedly throughout human life. The Midbar is the space between identities. It is the period after one reality has ended, but before the next reality has fully emerged. It is the place between forms. It is the wilderness between redemption and mission. And as we will see, every one of us spends part of our lives living in the Midbar. One of the things I've become increasingly aware of over the last several years is that life does not unfold in a straight line. We often imagine that growth should be linear. We move from one stage to the next, continually accumulating knowledge, experience, success, and stability. But when you speak to people who have lived long enough, a different picture begins to emerge. Life moves in cycles. There are periods of building and periods of questioning, periods of clarity and periods of confusion. There are periods where everything feels stable and periods where the structures that once defined our lives begin to shift beneath our feet. The Torah has been teaching this concept all along. The Torah has its own language for these periods of transition. The Torah calls them a midbar. The journey of the Jewish people provides a simple but profound framework. Mitzrayim to Midbar to Eretz Yisrael, or constriction to transformation to fulfillment. Egypt is where one identity ends. The Midbar is where a new identity is formed. Eretz Yisrael is where that identity is lived. This is true of nations. This is true of humanity, and it is true of every one of us. The Jewish people leave Egypt through open miracles. They witness the 10 plagues. They cross the Sea of Reeds. The Egyptian army is destroyed. Redemption has occurred. Slavery is over. Yet despite all of this, they do not immediately enter the land of Israel. Why? Why didn't Hashem simply take them directly from Egypt into Israel? Why was a Midbar necessary? The answer is that redemption and transformation are not the same thing. The Jewish people had left Egypt physically, but they had not yet become the nation they were meant to be. They were no longer slaves, but they were not yet builders. Before they could enter their mission, they needed a period of transformation. The Midbar sits between redemption and mission, and that is one of the reasons it is so relevant to our own lives. Many people experience periods where they are no longer who they once were, but they have not yet become who they are going to be. The old identity no longer fits. The old assumptions no longer work. The old goals no longer inspire. Yet the next chapter has not fully revealed itself. A person can spend months or even years in this uncomfortable space. The natural tendency during these periods is to assume something has gone wrong, and it can be difficult to remember that everything is going according to plan, that these periods are not evidence of failure, they are evidence of transformation. One of the first things Hashem does in the Midbar is remove the normal systems through which people derive certainty. There's no agriculture. There's no economy. There's no predictable structure. Food arrives through manna. Water comes from Miriam's well. Protection comes from the clouds of glory. The nation is forced to confront a difficult truth. We spend most of our lives believing that the things we rely upon are the source of what we receive. We think our paycheck is the source of our income. We think our employer is the source of our livelihood. We think our business is the source of our success. We think our investments are the source of our wealth. We think our doctor is the source of our health. But in the Midbar, Hashem systematically removes every one of those illusions. There are no farms. There are no businesses. There are no markets. There are no supply chains. There are no natural systems through which food, water, and protection arrive. And yet the people continue to eat. They continue to drink. They continue to survive. One of the deepest purposes of the Midbar is that Hashem temporarily removes the channels so that people can finally see the source. And perhaps this is why Midbar periods are so uncomfortable in our own lives. A career changes, a relationship changes, a financial situation changes, a role we depended upon disappears, an identity we built our life around begins to dissolve. What makes these moments so frightening is not merely the loss of the channel. It is the realization that we had mistaken the channel for the source. The Midbar forces a person to rediscover where their security truly comes from. We become attached to careers, routines, financial structures, positions, relationships, and identities. Over time, we begin drawing our sense of security from them. Then a Midbar period arrives and those structures begin shaking. The result feels terrifying because we suddenly discover how much certainty we had attached to the things that were never meant to be the ultimate source of certainty. The Midbar is also where the Jewish people receive the Torah. This itself is remarkable and quite telling. The Torah is not given in Egypt. It's not given in Israel. It is not given in a functioning society. It's given in a wilderness. Torah is not only a guide for stable periods of life, Torah is specifically designed to guide us through periods of transformation. The Midbar shows how many of the major failures of that generation correspond to reactions people still have whenever they enter periods of transition. The first is the golden calf. Moshe disappears. The future becomes uncertain. The people panic and immediately construct something visible, tangible, and familiar. This is profoundly a human reaction. When people feel uncertainty, they often attempt to recreate the past. They search for something that allows them to feel the way they once felt. They try to recover a former identity. They try to return to an earlier version of themselves. Problem is that Hashem is not asking them to go backward. The Midbar is not about returning to Egypt. It is about becoming someone new. This helps explain what modern culture calls a midlife crisis. Many people reach a stage of life where the goals and identities that drove the first half of their life begin losing their hold. The mistake many people make is assuming that something has gone wrong. But often what is happening is that they have entered a midbar. They have already left their personal Mitzrayim. Their old identity is no longer sufficient, but they have not yet entered their personal Eretz Yisrael. They are living in the space between who they were and who they are becoming. Because they do not understand what is happening, they attempt to solve the problem by going backwards. The man buys the sports car. The woman pursues a relationship that makes her feel young again. Responsibilities become abandoned. Someone becomes obsessed with reliving a previous chapter of their life. From the outside, these behaviors appear irrational, but they are not irrational at all. They are attempts to escape the midbar. The person senses that their current identity is dissolving. Rather than asking, who is Hashem calling me to become next, they ask, how can I become who I used to be? The second challenge of the midbar is represented by the spies. If the golden calf represents attachment to the past, the spies represent fear of the future. The nation stands at the threshold of the land of Israel. The next stage is waiting for them, yet they recoil, because entering the land means responsibility. It means building, creating, leading, fighting, and carrying the burden of mission. Sometimes people do not fear failure. They fear becoming the person they are capable of becoming. They fear the responsibility that comes with growth. The third challenge is Korach. Korach represents resentment toward the process itself, resentment toward the structure guiding the journey. Instead of accepting that growth unfolds according to Hashem's timetable, Korach attempts to seize control of the process. In many ways, these three stories describe the three great temptations of every midbar: the temptation to go backward, the temptation to avoid moving forward, and the temptation to reject the process altogether. As you can see, these are not merely historical events, but reoccurring patterns of human behavior. We enter midbar periods. We try to recreate the past. We fear the future. We become frustrated with the process. Yet the Torah continues teaching the same lesson. Follow the cloud. Continue moving even when you do not fully understand where the journey is leading. This is why the Torah spends an entire sefer describing a generation in transition. The Midbar is not the destination. It is not Egypt, and it is not Israel. It is the space in between. It is the space where transformation occurs. Yet the Torah devotes extraordinary attention to it because transformation itself is one of the central experiences of human life. This is why the Torah spends the entire sefer describing a generation in transition. If we step back and look at the Torah as a whole, a remarkable pattern emerges. Bereshit tells the story of creation, humanity, and of the families that will become the Jewish people. Shemos describes the birth of a nation through exile, redemption, and the revelation at Sinai. Vayikra provides the spiritual framework through which that nation will maintain its relationship with Hashem. Then comes Bamidbar. The nation exists, the Torah has been given, the Mishkan has been built, everything appears to be in place. Yet one critical question remains: how does a nation transform from what it was into what it is meant to become? The answer occupies nearly the entire second half of the Torah. Bamidbar is the story of transformation. Devarim is the final preparation before entering the land. Together, they describe the difficult journey between receiving a mission and becoming capable of fulfilling it. The challenge of the Midbar is not merely surviving uncertainty. The challenge is recognizing that uncertainty itself may be part of Hashem's design. The Jewish people were not wandering aimlessly. They were being prepared. And many of the Midbar periods we experience through our own lives are not signs that we have lost our way. They are the stages through which Hashem prepares us for the next chapter of our mission.
Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed the episode and found it meaningful, please take a moment to rate, review, and share the podcast.